Placebo fans for you.
Discover all our latest shows, sessions and mixes on the BBC Sounds app.
6 Music.
BBC Radio. BBC Radio 6 Music.
Right now, it's Chris Hawkins.
My special guest on the show this afternoon is Placebo's lead singer, who features in a new documentary film about the band called This Search for Meaning. Brian Molko, hello.
Hi, Chris.
Why did you want to make a film about your life, Brian?
I didn't. And Steph didn't either. It wasn't our idea. I don't think doing a documentary that centers on us, you know, as individuals and as a band, is something that comes naturally to us. But our managers and our record company said to us, you know, it's 30 years, almost. I mean, it's been 30 years since me and Steph got together and started writing songs, which was 1994. So we agreed on the basis that we could do something as groundbreaking as possible with the format of a documentary, you know, itself. We didn't just want to do another, you know, flat documentary with a bunch of talking heads in it. You know, we wanted to try and subvert the form, I suppose.
You start the film by saying that you don't like being famous or having your life documented. If you didn't set out to be famous, what did you want?
I wanted freedom from the daily grind. You know, when I was 11, I looked at my father and, you know, I said, you know, so you go to the same place every day and you do the same thing and you wear that monkey suit. And he went, yeah, that's life. And even at the age of 11, I went, no, it's not my life. It can't be my life. So already at that point, I was trying to sort of, you know, find a way, essentially not to become, you know, a productive member of society, you know, to try and kind of live life on my own terms and not to have to, you know, get a job that I didn't like most people have to do. And, you know, try and get myself into a situation where I could just simply make a living from being creative. You know, that was my ambition, you know, to be able to afford to rent an apartment and not starve. You know, that was the goal.
Is the same true for Stefan, the other half of Placebo?
Well, I don't know, I guess you'd have to ask him, but Stefan, you know, to the best of my knowledge, you know, found a real sense of belonging in music. And so when I met him again in London, he was studying music and he was studying engineering and all of these things. So it was very, very clear that, you know, that was the field that he was going to go in. But I don't think at that time he knew what context it was going to be. And he needed to bump into me by accident in a tube station for context to be provided and possibility to be provided. And what's kind of beautiful about our story is that neither myself nor Steph could have ever imagined in a million years that we'd end up, you know, forging a lifelong relationship, a lifelong creative relationship, and a lifelong brotherhood, really.
Could you ever have believed that you'd be global superstars?
No, I mean, the idea goes through your mind, you know, but when you're, you know, when you're 19, 20 and you're playing these, you know, bars and pubs and, you know, your local, you know, your local Rasta pub down the road, you know, in Deptford, you're just kind of, you're grateful to be able to be in the position where you're beginning to learn stagecraft, you know. But I thought that we were too much of an anomaly. I thought that we were too different from what was going on for people to really kind of understand it and, you know, want to be connected to it. And I was proved wrong. And, you know, I'm really happy about that. What I realized is that our sense of being outsiders and how that translated into music was appealing to all the outsiders, to all the people who felt that they didn't fit in. And we didn't set out to do that, but quickly I realized that we were appealing to the misfits and the misshapes and the square pegs and the round holes. That reflected back to us who we were. And so at that point, it was almost as if we kind of felt like there was a tribe out there, you know, that we could relate to and could relate to us.
In the film, you say that you're less and less interested in society and how people feel about you. What about your fans?
Well, I really, I have no control over what my fans think, what my fans feel, and, what my fans want from me. And so, I kind of have to operate with the idea that if I come up with an idea and it excites me, and it really excites me first, if it doesn't do that, I just don't think it's going to translate. There's an aphorism, about this. It's like, other people's opinion about me is none of my business, And I think that's really useful because I'm naturally quite self-conscious. And so if I take everybody else's opinion of me on board, then I think I'm going to be paralyzed, I have enough of a challenging time being okay with myself in my own head, and getting to a place of self-acceptance and having decent self-esteem. If I take on board all of the positives and the negatives and the ambivalent and the indifferent opinions about me, I think I'm just going to get far too overwhelmed to not be paralyzed.
So the film features extensive contributions from Joe Talbot, Self-Esteem, Shirley Manson, Robbie Williams and Youngblood. And Youngblood says that you look like who he wants to be. Who are you, Brian?
Good question. I'm the rhythm guitarist and singer and songwriter in Placebo. I'm somebody who felt when I started off in this band, I felt that, there was a kind of an underrepresentation of who we were and people like us. I just don't think that at that point in time in musical history, people like us were being represented. In the 70s and 80s, it happened, It happened with Bowie, it happened with Lou Reed, it happened with Iggy, But at that point, there wasn't anybody really to represent the misshapes, the misfits, and the square pegs and the round holes. And having grown up like that, it was, it was heartwarming and it gave us a sense of belonging, But who am I? It changes and it evolves, and I'm grateful for that because I'd hate to be stuck. And I think that when you stop learning, you stop living, and you start to die. So I just want to get better at what I do.
On your most recent album, Never Let Me Go, there's a song called Surrounded by Spies. Are you paranoid?
Yeah. Wouldn't you be? Aren't you? I don't really sort of engage in anything anymore that's really going to get me into a lot of trouble, with the authorities. But, I just feel, particularly walking around London, I can just feel the gaze, upon me. Maybe paranoid isn't the best word to use, but I have a tendency to catastrophize. I have a tendency to, project into the worst case scenario. And that's good for writing, and it's good for, coming up with ideas to sing about, because you can create these little small disaster movies in your head, and then turn them into song. But I'm not too sure it's very, very healthy for, for a human being in every day, to kind of feel like that.
Here is Surrounded by Spies, Placebo from Never Let Me Go. My special guest on the show this afternoon started his band Placebo in 1994. 30 years on, a new documentary film about the band called This Search for Meaning has just come out. I'm delighted that Brian Molko is here with me on Six Music. You've called yourself an outsider, and that Placebo are a band for outsiders, by outsiders. So how do you define an outsider?
Very good question. To me, an outsider is somebody who grows up feeling like they don't belong in their own family, at school, socially. An outsider is somebody who is different, has the courage to remain different, but has to somehow exist outside of the generalized and accepted morality and social structure in society. I think it's just people who didn't fit in whether it's because of their sexuality or gender issues, and or just being raised like I was in a very religious environment and having to rebel against that.
In the film, Shirley Manson says that girls and boys want to be with you. What does that mean to you?
I wanted to make a bold statement that sexuality is something that's very, very fluid. I wanted to present the idea that it's not about binaries, that it's more on a spectrum, you know. Obviously, there are completely straight people and there are completely gay people out there. But I think the majority of us, kind of exist in more of a gray area than that. And that's part of what I really wanted to present as well.
Why did you want to present it?
Because it was who I was. By expressing myself, I needed to find my identity. But I guess I already had it. I just needed it confirmed, or I needed a mirror for it to reflect back to me. And that's kind of what the audience became. And it was very, very surprising, because at the beginning, in the early gigs, when like 100 people would come or 50 people would come, the majority of them were like us, and it was exciting and refreshing to find that there were so many more people out there like us, and we didn't expect that.
So as time's gone on and times have changed over 30 years, how have your audience changed?
It's really multi-generational, and I'm really grateful for that. So the people who discovered us in the first 2 albums, for example, in the 90s, they're still there. They've grown up, and some of them are bringing their kids. A lot of them are further back towards the bar. But every tour we do, there's, we're continuously impressed by the fact that there's a whole bunch of young people in the first, 10 to 15 rows. I think we must be doing something right if we can continue to appeal to the youth of today, even though we're not amazingly youthful. We're definitely middle-aged now.
Why do you put yourself on stage?
Because I don't know what else to do. I started off acting when I was about 11, and then after that I went to drama school. So kind of there was something, even as an 11, 12-year-old, the stage felt like a safe place for me, and I didn't feel safe growing up, because I grew up in quite a violent household, so I didn't feel safe at home, and I didn't necessarily feel safe at school. But there was something about being on stage and doing theater that made me feel like I was in control, because so many other things that should have been controlled in my life were just completely chaotic, So yeah, when I was on stage as an adolescent, acting in school plays and things like that, it was a place where I could breathe. It was a place that I could feel like I finally had control over something. But truthfully, Chris, I don't know what else I could do, and I've been doing this since I was in my, early 20s or just 20 years old. So it's my entire adult life, I can't drive, I'm computer illiterate, so that's like most of the jobs in the world are kind of, yeah.
You toured with David Bowie before you'd even released an album. Mm-hmm. You became friends with David Bowie. Mm-hmm. And I wonder what it was about you that he loved so much. My guess is that he saw a lot of himself in you. I wonder how much of his performance you take.
Well, it was really a masterclass, opening up for David Bowie, because, you'd play for half an hour, and then you'd be able to go backstage, and then a half an hour later, we would walk in front of the barrier, and we would just kind of stand there for the entire thing. And we had the best view in the house. So it was the most phenomenal musical education, and an education about stagecraft and the possibilities. you know, the cool thing about David is that he took a lot of risks when it came to scenography and the way that, in the way that he presented himself on stage. And some of the risks were more successful than others, you know. But what was really, really cool also, he was such a legend, but he was still not afraid to fail. He was still not afraid to take as many risks as possible, knowing full well that some of them were going to fail. And then it really doesn't matter. Was it Bertrand Russell or somebody who said, you know, if you're going to fail, fail better, you know? Or Charlie Kaufman, who wrote Being John Malkovich, you know, says failure is a badge of honor.
You've never failed, though, have you?
Oh, no, you can't have success without failure. You have to fail first. And if you continue to take risks, then, you know, things may not be an abject failure, but with a little bit of distance, you'll look back at a certain song or a certain sound or a certain set of decisions and go, well, maybe that wasn't the best thing to do right then. But this is a teachable moment, and I can learn from this, and I can do better in the future.
Brian, stay with me, please, and let's talk some more after this. This is The Bitter End. The Bitter End. It's Placebo. Phenomenal. On Six Music, and their lead singer Brian Molko is with me this afternoon, and a new film about the band, This Search for Meaning, has just come out. Brian, that's one of your biggest hits. Do you get a sense of when a song's going to be a hit? Yeah,
definitely. You know you've hit on something. You don't know how much of a hit it is, but you have a very strong instinctual feeling that it's going to work, and that a lot of people are going to be drawn to it.
Are you here for the hits?
Not necessarily. I think they're a welcome byproduct, you know, but we're not interested in trying to write hits. We're interested in having longevity and staying true to our singular voice. There have been moments in Placebo's career where we've tried to be a little bit more commercial. And now I look back at it and I go, well, maybe that wasn't the best series of decisions to make. And so now I don't concern myself with that. Now I just kind of concern myself with what I can do and what I can learn, and how I just simply want to make an emotional connection to people.
In the film, you say that you don't care about being unpopular. Do you really not care?
I can't care, because it would take up too much space in my head, and again, I think it would lead to paralysis. Rick Rubin will tell you this. You have to make the music for you. You have to not concern yourself with the audience. We're at 30 years. You know, my ambition is to be like The Cure, you know, so there's at least another 20, 25 years, you know, to go. And I think if you want that kind of longevity, it's ridiculous to assume that you can be popular all the time, you know, during such a long period of time, all of these decades. So you have to get used to the idea of sometimes being in fashion, sometimes being out of fashion.
How seriously do you take the platform that you have and the voice that it gives you?
How seriously? Very seriously, you know, because it's going to be my legacy, you know, it's going to be my one stab at immortality, you know. So yeah, I take it really seriously, and that's why I have such respect for it. And I think it would be a huge disservice to the art form itself to not take it that seriously, and to not try and explore things which are really serious within the music as well.
In the film, Joe Talbot says the act of freedom of speech is listening, not talking.
That is one of the greatest quotes I have ever heard in my life, and it just goes to show what an incredibly intelligent and sensitive mind Joe Talbot has. And a lot of what Joe Talbot says in the film, Shirley Manson too, really, really blew me away.
Are you a good listener?
Yeah, I prefer to listen than to talk.
Is Steph, the other half of the band, a good listener?
Yeah. Steph is a very kind, compassionate, and gentle soul. You know, we can tell each other things that we would never even tell our significant others, you know, because there's just such an acceptance of who we are, and such an acceptance of the fact, you know, of the idea that we also are changing always. We have a relationship which is completely unique, and one that I've never had a relationship like this in my life, and I never will again.
Have you got the same energy that you started with 30 years ago to keep pushing?
Physically, perhaps not, but in terms of my ambition and my drive and my need to express myself and my need for a sense of purpose, then yes, absolutely. In fact, I think I started to land, and I think I'm getting more powerful, and I think that there's a lot more to explore. And Never Let Me Go feels like a real creative resurgence for us, and it also feels like a kind of, you know, a reacceptance, you know, globally of Placebo. And it's a very different record from its predecessor. The types of themes that are explored in Never Let Me Go, you know, surveillance culture, the climate crisis, gender identity, these are all very, very serious subjects, and it's our job as artists, you know, to reflect that.
So is there new music in the pipeline?
Well, we're going to have to get together at some point and start writing again. There's nothing in the pipeline right now, but there will be. I just can't say when.
You started the band, Brian, with no plan. How's that worked out?
Great. Look at where we are, you know? I mean, it's taken a few decades, you know, but I've realized what I set out to do, which was not to enter society under its own terms and never to have to get a real job, you know? And I'm going to continue because, like I said before, I'm completely unemployable, you know? So this is, you know, I can't risk not doing this anymore.
Brian, thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Chris.